So, you come to a point where things make sense and it fit, and then you have to either accept that or not. So now when we look at Champollion and the whole decipherment of the Rosetta Stone, which is basically what they tell us is how they was able to crack the code of the Egyptian hieroglyphics. And just right off the bat, anybody who really is into Kemet, your spidey senses should be tingling because it doesn't fit. Something doesn't fit about all that. And we're going to get into it. But you can be skeptical about the translation and everything that the Europeans have to say about the decipherment of the Egyptian hieroglyphics. But then you have to still really ask yourself and look at the African scholars and Black scholars who have also followed Metu and have studied Metu and has said that it has been deciphered. You have to ask yourself, do you then trust them to have did their own research at some point to figure out what they are reading is true? Is the hieroglyphics deciphered? Do we know what it's talking about, what it's referring to, and what have you? So this is something you have to ask yourself and figure out, can you accept the Europeans' documents and what they're saying as far as the translation? And, can you accept the fact that, there have been African scholars who have did their own work and trust that they have done their own research and understand that the fact that they are following certain documents is because they have done their own research. So now when you start digging into this whole thing about the Rosetta Stone, you'll find out that the Rosetta Stone was found in the Nile Delta in a city called Rajid in Arabic, or Rossetti or Rosetta in French. It was found by one of Napoleon's soldiers. It was getting ready to be used in a rebuilding of Fort Julian, which was built and controlled by the Ottoman Empire until Napoleon came and took it over. So, it's a good thing they figured out it was something worth saving because it was getting ready to be used for scraps. But the Rosetta Stone basically, it contains the three texts. We know the top text, ancient Egyptian, the middle text is Demotic, the bottom is ancient Greek. I know you guys know this stuff already, but I want to get into it for people who don't know about the Rosetta Stone because there's a lot to it, a lot more to it, that I have to explain. But, it has these three sets of texts, and this is the issue. You have, as I said, you have the ancient Egyptian. It's not complete, by the way. The stone should be a lot bigger than what it is. It's broken, obviously. It's chipped in places. But the top text is ancient Egyptian, the middle is Demotic, and the bottom is ancient Greek. And, the whole part about deciphering it was first trying to understand that all three sets of texts say the exact same thing. Now, Champollion is given the credit for deciphering the Rosetta Stone, but there's a lot of people who worked on it before he came along and basically, finished the thing off. The Rosetta Stone is basically talking about Ptolemy IV is talking about Ptolemy V and how he should be celebrated for his work and stuff like that. This is what the stone is talking about. Now, the whole issue is, of course, as I said, is trying to figure out, was the Greek talking about the same thing as the Demotic and the ancient Egyptian? And once they figured out it's talking about the same thing, now the whole problem was deciphering it, like figuring out how to match up the words, the corresponding words from Greek, which they already knew, the ancient Greek, the Demotic, which they was having trouble with, and of course, the ancient Egyptian, which they claim they had no clue how to decipher it. So Champollion basically deciphered the name Ptolemy from the Demotic text, and he did so using the Egyptian cartouche. And he determined that the phonetic properties of the Demotic text corresponds with the Egyptian hieroglyphics. So Demotic text is basically like the common language in Kemet. It was like a common language, according to Herodotus, who basically gave it that name. So you have Demotic, and before Demotic, you had the hieratic hieroglyphics. And a hieratic is basically like the priestly text, the priestly writings. It was what they used when they had to write a whole lot. So basically, if you had to write a 2-page letter, I mean, if you use hieroglyphics only, then it would take a long time, because hieroglyphics is basically really detailed. You got to draw stuff out. So hieratic was basically developed alongside of hieroglyphics, in case you had to write stuff like really, really long and put in document form. So this is what the priests use. They use a reed brush when they wrote in hieratic. It's that writing tool you see Thoth always had, a little pen he has when he writes. So you have the Demotic, you have the hieratic, and then you have cursive hieroglyphics. And cursive hieroglyphics is basically like what they used when they had to write like books or religious documents. And it's when you had to do like a huge, large work, but it had to basically be in hieroglyphic form almost. So it's like a dumbed down version of hieroglyphics. When you look at it, you can see it's not as detailed as hieroglyphics. But they used it, when they had to write books and things like that. It had to be in the papyrus of Anu. Is written in cursive hieroglyphics, so to speak. So, you have the Demotic, you have the hieratic, you have cursive hieroglyphics. And then you get to regular hieroglyphics, and then you can go further than that, actually. You got regular hieroglyphics, you can get into the New Kingdom, the Middle Kingdom, and Old Kingdom hieroglyphics, because they did things a little bit, different each time. So when you start getting into the writings of the ancient Egyptians, you start getting into the language and everything like that, it goes back. It's a lot that you have to deal with, that you can't just, look at a Rosetta Stone and decipher. We're talking about thousands of years of writing and language. So Champollion looked at the Rosetta Stone. He could see the ancient Egyptian, you could see the ancient Greek, and you have the Demotic, which they knew was a Egyptian language that they actually spoke in Egypt. But we also know that Coptic came from Demotic, and Coptic was the last language that they spoke in Kemet, before the Arabs came and basically took Kemet away from the Romans. Coptic was the language that they used, and Coptic basically has borrowed words from Greek. It is also similar in its alphabet to the Greek alphabet. So, again, the thing is, we always talk about how they stole our language. Then, this goes back all the way to ancient Kemet, where we know for sure that one, Coptic is basically like a Christian language. Basically, it's made for Christianity, and they created it and forced it on the Egyptians to basically get rid of the Demotic language and to really instill Christianity in them. And we're going to see that a lot as we go through in this video, how Coptic was basically the language that came along and to try to basically hide Egyptian. Now, remember I said you have English was made for Christianity, Coptic as well, Arabic for the Quran, and Hebrew for Judaism, or what have you. These languages is created to cover up the true origins of the people and the religion itself. When you really get into it, it's there to cover it up. So understand, no matter what Champollion came up with, the problem is we are not going to know how the ancient Egyptian language actually sounds. How it sounds coming from them. So we can only speculate. We can only wonder, is it close? So no matter how much they worked on Rosetta Stone, no matter how much we talk about it now, we're not going to know 100% for sure. Is what we are pronouncing and believing is the Egyptian language actually the language? Did it actually sound this way? Are we pronouncing words correctly? And this is one of the dilemmas that we find, and that Champollion found when he was going through this whole deciphering. Champollion deciphered the name Ptolemy first. So he found two symbols in the name Ptolemy that matched the name of Thutmose and Ramses. So now we know that, again, we're not going to know exactly how the Egyptian names sound. We're not going to know that. But we do know that the Coptic comes from Demotic. So Coptic, they understand. So if he can basically find the word in Coptic that corresponds or fits with ancient Greek, which they also understand, and that's on the Rosetta Stone, then that will help them to decipher the rest of the Rosetta Stone. Now, again, understand they already believe that it all says the same thing anyway. It's just written in different languages. But there's an opportunity now, since you have all this stuff in different languages, to basically break down exactly what the Egyptian hieroglyphics is saying. So if they can find in Coptic something that matches in ancient Greek, and then they will get the decipherment for the demonic and basically the decipherment for the ancient Egyptian using these two symbols that he found in the name of Ptolemy, Thutmose, and Ramses. So let me explain a little bit more. Okay, so let me explain. These are basically the two symbols that Champollion seen, that he saw in the Ptolemy cartouche, and he saw in the name for Thutmose and Ramses as well. So it looks something like, and if you give my hieroglyphic style, what you have. So two symbols right here that he got the letters MS or the M-I-S sound or the Ms sound for Coptic. So you have this symbol, which is the two symbols, but you can also have, let me see, and if you can see that. And he got the MS sound from these glyphs. So we know in Coptic, he looked and seen that MS basically translate in Coptic as to give birth. This is why we put MS in front of the woman's name or MIS in front of the woman's name. And you get MS or MIS or MIS in Coptic. So we have MS or MIS means to give birth. And we have the word in English, demise, which basically means, death. So he saw this in the Thutmose and Ramses, the demise or the mess or that sound. And he basically figured out that it's in Coptic. And he looked at it in ancient Greek, and he saw a group of words referring to birthday. So that gave him a connection that he had birthday, and he had a word, basically Egyptian word meaning to give birth. And he made a connection from the Coptic to the Demotic to the ancient Greek. And it helped him basically decipher the stone. Now, obviously, this wasn't the same for all of the hieroglyphics, but it helped him to decipher what Coptic couldn't. So now you also got to remember that a lot of people wrote about ancient Egypt. This is one of the reasons why we know, of course, a lot of the things to be true. Why I always rag on the Hebrews, because, so many people wrote about ancient Kemet. And you have, the same with almost every single civilization. People wrote about these civilizations because they went there, they explored. And when you go to a different civilization, you already know if you travel, when you go to like Aruba or Mexico, you know that this is totally different from where you come from. And it's something to talk about, and we post pictures today. So back then, of course, they wrote about and they talked about the different civilizations that they visited. So Kemet, of course, was written about a lot. And they already knew about some of the names of the pharaohs. They already knew about some of the customs and things like that. People like Herodotus, of course, they had access to those writings, Champollion and them, when they was doing this decipherment. So they had access to some stelas and some writings, and people already had like this basic understanding of some of the let's just say, the myths or what have you of ancient Kemet. So it helped him in his decipherment. Now, some of the stuff he used some of the stellars and some of the stuff that people provided, but a lot of things he just basically took back to Coptic since Coptic was working. So let me basically explain what he's seeing. And you basically have, let's see, forget my cartoon strong, but you'll have this and so Champollion seen, okay, he looked at he said, you know what, this looks like a sun. And he said, in Coptic, we know the sun is Ra or Re. So you have Ra, and he said, you know what, this thing looks like an M. And you have Ra, M-E-S-E-S, which is Ramses. So Ra, Ramses, where they got, or Rametu, is where they got it. And the thing is, when you see this, what you'll find out later is a lot of it is like abbreviation for the Greeks or the Romans. So sometimes when they did hieroglyphics, they didn't want to write the entire name because we know Ramses' real name is like way longer than that. You need like 2 cartouches to get his name. So this is what they did. So another thing. You have, let me see. Okay, so another thing that Champollion seen, he remembered, as I said, they had writings from Herodotus and Diodorus or what have you to help them out in their decipherment. So you have the ibis right here. He's seen the ibis, and he said, you know what, I remember Herodotus said that Thoth basically gave them the writing system, and he was represented by an ibis. So when he seen the ibis, he had Thoth. And then you had Moses, M-S, M-E-S, or M-O-S. So when he seen this glyph, he put together Thoth, Moses. And that's how you got the Thutmoses name. Again, the whole thing is, you could say it's not the same translation, or it's incorrect, but when you put it together, it actually fits with who they are talking about, which is Thutmoses. So it's a lot of different ways. When he went back and just simply used the Coptic, it was fitting with a lot of the things he was trying to decipher. So a lot of the cartouches and with a lot of the hieroglyphics, he just simply took it back to Coptic or took it back to things that made sense. And this is like really clear, easy. You got Thoth, Moses. And when you look at the hieroglyph for Thoth, sometimes you see it going sideways and it looks basically just like that. So it's just some of the things that he used. Now, again, obviously you can't do this with every single symbol, but it will help you to isolate some of the sounds, but it won't help you to basically decipher an entire wall of hieroglyphics. So that basically gives you like a little insight into what Champollion is talking about, and that it can't all possibly be true. You can't decipher all of those Egyptian texts using these methods or just simply going back to Coptic. There has to be another way that you use, another thing that you use to help you decipher all of these Egyptian hieroglyphics. I mean, even going back to the hieratic and cursive hieroglyphics into the New Kingdom, Middle Kingdom, Old Kingdom, where they use different styles. And then you have to still differentiate from when the Romans was writing hieroglyphics and when the Greeks was writing hieroglyphics, in which case we see that if they didn't want to put Ramses' whole name up there, you see how they did it with the sun and, the way I showed you. And in these cases, a lot of times, what we call like abbreviations, a lot of the times the abbreviations was done by the Greeks and the Romans. And it just took people a long time to figure out that this was the Romans and Greeks writing in hieroglyphics and that they just abbreviated. So, with Champollion, you can't really go by everything he's talking about. What he really did was basically, kick in the door and leave it open for a lot of people to come in and correct some of his mistakes and basically help to really decipher the hieroglyphics. The problem is a lot of these people who came along later and was doing work, they are not recognized, they are not talked about. And then you have a lot of people like myself and many other scholars who basically did their own research because, listen, man, I'm going to tell you, if you get into this stuff, if you're really into it, and you're really into hieroglyphics and deciphering it and looking into the language, when you look at the excuse they give us from Champollion, it don't fit. It's just that simple. It's like, the stuff makes sense. The hieroglyphics, you see, well, wait a minute, what y'all saying fits. I mean, we can basically read this stuff, but the way they're telling us how they did it don't work. It don't fit. So they're leaving something out. And this is causing a huge problem for people who are now starting to come into this knowledge and start to do the research. And it will lead you to believe or not believe in Champollion, but it will lead you to basically question the whole process of reading, writing, and understanding hieroglyphics. So now here's the thing that we are forgetting about. A lot of people forget that. Remember, we know that the Greeks lived in Kemet. We know that they worked with the Egyptians. We know that they lived with the Egyptians. And we have to remember that, one, the Egyptians did not adopt any outside customs. And Herodotus attests to that fact, that the Egyptians wouldn't learn any other languages or anything like that. So we can assume that the Greeks also knew Demotic, and this is how they communicated with the Egyptians. They had to communicate some way, somehow, unless there was another language spoken that we don't know about, or Demotic is just a lower form spoken only by just the commoners in Kemet. That could be possible as well. But we have to assume that the Greeks had to know this language, and this was the way they was communicating. Now, again, Herodotus is the one who gave it the name Demotic. The Egyptians actually called the language Shichat, which basically means writing for documents. So again, we're not going to know exactly how the language sounded, but it doesn't mean that the Egyptian hieroglyphics or the Metu was not deciphered. The simple fact that the Egyptians had a name for it gives us a clue that, this is either a lower form of writing or a lower form of communication developed probably just to communicate, to do business or what have you. And there was another language that was spoken. But again, it doesn't mean that the hieroglyphics wasn't figured out or that they didn't correspond, the Demotic, to fit with the actual hieroglyphics in order for it to be translated or deciphered. And this is something we're going to get into as we go along. So now, as I said in the beginning, I can understand why people are skeptical about the translation of the Metu. As I said, when I first started studying this stuff, when I got into it, when I looked into the explanation for the decipherment of the Rosetta Stone and the Egyptian hieroglyphics, and I read about the whole story with Champollion, what I'm giving you right now, I said to myself, you know what, this is some bullshit. It's bullshit. Because it just didn't fit, it didn't seem right, especially when you start getting into the Coptic part. Because Coptic would not decipher the entire Egyptian hieroglyphics as I'm explaining here. And they're not really going to give you too much more information into what else Champollion used. So, of course, it's really suspect, it's skeptical. And we know that, these people are. This is what they are doing. This is why a lot of people in the Kemetic community don't want to really deal with European writings and stuff like that, because we know they lie and they damn sure not going to tell us the truth about something, especially if that truth is going to reveal African people to look smarter than what they have portrayed us. And this is basically the case in this whole thing with Champollion, as we're going to get into. But when you look at history, you still have to say to yourself, when you look at the history between the Greeks and the Egyptians, you have to say to yourself, of course, the Metu was deciphered. Of course, the Greeks can read it, because, they would not have turned on the Egyptians. They wouldn't have set them up and turned on them if they couldn't read the glyphs. It don't make no sense. We know, again, Thales, we know Pythagoras, Plato, We know they studied in Kemet. I mean, look at all of the things that the Greeks and Romans was able to build, after conquest of Kemet. I mean, all of the structures, we know before Kemet fell, they didn't have none of these cities and everything like that. They didn't have the kind of architecture that they are known for when Egypt was in its heyday. We didn't see this kind of stuff until conquest. So, of course, Thales, Herodotus, Pythagoras, all these people who talk about, Greek and talk about Kemet, we know they went there, they studied. The knowledge and mathematics that they have is unbelievable. And they give openly the credit to Kemet and going there to study. So they would not have left, as I said before, all that gold, all them jewels, just the priceless artifacts that, they found later on in Kemet. They wouldn't have left all that stuff there if they didn't leave for something far more valuable that would basically have them set, forever. And they left with the knowledge and information that they used to build the empire that we still see in power today. So they had to, of course, decipher all this stuff and understand the Rosetta Stone. I mean, understand the language and everything like that. They had to. So we know what happened. After they got the information, after they basically didn't need Kemet no more, they decreed that, the temples was devil worship and it was demon worship. Anybody who go in there and start studying any of the Kemetic writings or what have you, it was considered to be demonic text or the demonic text or devil worship. And, the Pope closed the temples down and basically they left Kemet to be buried, in the sand. So now understand, when they did find the Rosetta Stone, of course, the powers that be knew what it was. They knew how to translate it. They know how to read the demonic. They knew how to read the hieroglyphics. Now, if Champollion really wanted to decipher the Egyptian hieroglyphics, where should he have gone? He should have went straight to Nubia, to the Sudan. We know there they got the Meroitic script. And the Meroitic script was basically created from the Egyptian hieroglyphics. It was created between 750 and 300 BCE. Now, it's basically, this is during the Napatan period. And Napatan is basically when Napatan was one of the capitals of Kush. So the Napatan is talked about by a lot of Greek scholars. Diodorus talks about it. Herodotus talks about it. So they knew all about it. So when it was basically using the writings from Herodotus, because when you start getting into what Champollion used to do this decipherment, as I said before, they went to some of the writings of Herodotus and Diodorus and a lot of the Greek scholars and, Plato and stuff like that to really try to get an understanding of the Egyptian text and what have you. So he should have went to Nubia because even then they knew about the Meroitic script. They knew all about it. And when you look here, we can see that they got the Meroitic demonic script. They have the Meroitic hieroglyphics. This is not something that is new on the scene. They understood that a lot of the people fled from Kemet down into lower Africa, where all the war was going on. So they knew about these scripts. They knew it was a possibility that either the entire Egyptian language survived somewhere else or it at least evolved into different languages. Now, again, as I said, the powers that be can already decipher the hieroglyphics. They already knew how to read Metu. Anybody who came along after that used African languages to decipher the Metu. And this is what Champollion used. If Champollion wasn't an agent that was put in place to do this whole, press tidbit about the Rosetta Stone to just basically make them look smarter than what they are, then he used African text to decipher the Metu, the Rosetta Stone, or what have you, because there's no way he could have just got the whole translation of all of the symbols and the Egyptian hieroglyphics using simply Coptic, which they try to lead you to believe. The problem is, of course, they don't want to give Kemet or give the African languages credit. Now, as I said, of course, the powers that be could read the Egyptian hieroglyphics. Anybody that tried to do a translation of the Egyptian hieroglyphics had to use African text, African writing to do the translation. There's no way Champollion could have got this whole entire translation done by simply using Coptic. And that's the issue. They don't want to give the credit to the African languages, because what you will find out is every single language that was used or derived from Egyptian hieroglyphics or a hieroglyphic style of writing was eventually replaced by Coptic. And this is why you see with the same thing with the Meroitic script that was replaced by Coptic. And this is why what we see with Demotic, you have Coptic, and why you can use Coptic to basically go back and decipher Demotic, because they took a little piece of every language that they changed and kind of sort of put it into that group or that civilization style of Coptic. So you'll have a bunch of different civilizations that have Coptic, but depending on the language that it derived from or they took it from, some of the phonetic or phonemes or some of the little things about the dialect will be changed to fit that specific civilization. And this is what we find. So it's a lot of civilizations in Africa that basically had hieroglyphic styles of writing. So we look at Liberia, Cameroon, Nigeria, so many other places, Somalia as well, that basically had a hieroglyphic style of writing. And we see that most of these was basically changed or, taken over and replaced with Coptic. So now you got to ask yourself a question, basically, what happened to the ancient Egyptians? And everybody always say that. Well, what happened to them? Where did they go? A lot of them did end up staying in Kemet, and we don't know how many. If you go to Kemet, you're going to see African people there. You don't know if they are natives of Kemet, that they evolved there and stayed there, which I doubt. But a lot of the people fled into Lower Africa. We know they went into Nigeria. They went to the Gala people who they had a strong relationship with, or the Igala people. We know they went into Benin. They went into the Sudan. They went to a lot of different places in Lower Africa where we still find remnants and artifacts of the ancient Egyptians. And they took the language with them, and the language evolved. Now, Champollion, or whoever did the decipherment of the metal letter that we have, that we look to today and read, whoever it is had to use African language to do the decipherment, period. There's no way around that. Or Champollion had to use it as well. Or, he is a fraud and probably was basically put there as a puppet to basically, kind of stir people away from the true decipherment or the real explanation of how they figured out the Rosetta Stone or figured out the decipherment of the metal letter. So he had to either be in on a whole big scam or use the African language and didn't want to basically report on it and tell where it came from to make itself look, smarter. There's no way in the world, as I said, that they deciphered it all using Coptic. It's just not possible, when you understand how this stuff works, that Coptic would basically account for the decipherment of the entire language. And this is what it seems like they're trying to project on people, that, the Christian Coptic can basically, reveal the text to the people. So when you start getting into it, we know they had to get certain dialects and tones and stuff from Africa, from these tribes, because we still find it to this day. When you start pronouncing some of the Egyptian words and how it sounds, if you go and then find it in an African civilization, what does that tell you? Now, to me, when I'm researching this stuff and when I hear people talking about the hieroglyphics, like I said, I can understand how people are skeptical about Metu nature and everything that involves the language as far as it pertains to Europeans. I understand how people are skeptical about it, how they can't really go along with what they are reading, because there are not a lot of books out there that a lot of people know about that's really getting into Metu nature and the history of it. Because when something makes sense and it fits, you basically leave it alone. But it never dawned on a lot of people to basically question the decipherment of it, because, it fits, it works. And this is something that I'm probably going to end up writing a book on, probably my third or fourth book. I'll probably get into this because there's so much more information than what's in here that will basically help a lot of people out down the line. Maybe books out that I don't know about that really go into what I'm going into here. But from our research, as I said, when you really get into something and you research stuff, what people are talking about, where they could have ran into a problem or an issue involving a subject because you came across the same thing in your research, which is why, as I always say, you don't stop at one source. You go to different sources and you try to figure out if the last source was true, or try to validate what the last source was talking about.